you mentioned earlier in the podcast that like the beach volleyball is a little bit of an older man's game. You can kind of excel as you become more proficient and more knowledgeable, and you kind of know more ball placement. I love that little thing when it's like, it feels like somebody's going to kill the ball and they just do that little two knuckle dink. And it's like, oh, that was such a smart play, like such a conservation of energy. Did you give any thought to moving over to beach volleyball, or do you play any beach volleyball?
I did. I grew up playing on the beach, loved the beach game. Still do, actually. Now that I can't play indoors anymore because my body would just be like, what are you doing, dumbass? And my knees would just be screaming at me. And even when I go play in the sand now, my knees hurt, but not nearly as bad. And so I still enjoy playing out there. And did I give it any thought? You do see a lot of guys finish out an indoor career and then go try their luck on the beach, because you still feel like you got a little left to give. The beach game is kind of a natural progression where it's not as hard on your body. And if you put in a lot of effort, you can actually do pretty well, because you already get the base of how to play the game really well. And, but for me, I played at the international indoor level for so long, almost 15 years. I was really ready to just not play for a while. And I actually stepped away from the game for like, man, I didn't touch a volleyball for like 6 years.
Really?
Yeah, I was really done. I was like, okay, like I need to go figure out my life now. Because, you know, there's that interesting transition period where you're like, okay, I've decided to retire. Now what am I going to do? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because when you're in it playing, you're not really making a ton of plans, because you feel a little bit invincible, right? You're like, I'm the top of the world, right? But then when you start hitting on the tail end, and then when it's over, you're like, oh shit, now I got to figure out what I'm actually going to do. And I mean, the standard answer is, well, I'm going to go into coaching, right? And I actually had a coaching background already. I owned a small business I had a coaching volleyball camp company that we did volleyball camps all around the U.S. And I coached a year at BYU, actually. I took a year off from playing professionally to go be the head coach at BYU in 2006, 2007. And so I had a coaching background, so it was kind of logical, and I was looking at different coaching opportunities at that time. But, you know, I randomly bumped into a good friend of mine that I've known many years, and he said, hey, I saw you retired. What are you doing now? And I said, I'm looking for that next chapter. And he goes, you should come talk to me about what I do at this consulting firm. I think you'd be really good doing management consulting. And I was like, sounds great. So my firm has written a bunch of New York Times best-selling books. He gave me the books to read, and I'm like, man, there's a lot of like connective tissue to what I just experienced on the volleyball court to what organizational company, you know, teams are trying to accomplish, that I think I could probably bring a lot of value and an interesting perspective to. And so met with the founders of our company at that time, and they thought it was a good fit too. And that was about 8.5 years ago when I started doing the management consulting work that I'm doing now.
So there is that weird thing, because we're both in our 40s, and I feel like professionally I'm just hitting my stride. Like I'm kind of peaking at 42. I kind of figure like my best earning years are going to be about 42 to 50. I've still got enough energy to do the side hustle of the podcast and the coaching business, and I still do 50 hours a week in the mortgage business. But how weird is it when you peak at like 29? Like I kind of think of it as like Guns N' Roses. Everybody's like, well, why is Axl Rose so fucked up and on drugs and fat? It's like, well, if you peaked at 28, you'd probably be fucked up too.
Kurt Cobain.
Yeah, Kurt Cobain, exactly. So what's that like when you're like, you're at the top of the world, you're playing in Italy, you're making big boy money for 6 months, I know you're happily married and you come from a Mormon faith, but maybe if you were a lesser man, you'd have women throwing themselves at you. Like what happens when you peak at 30 and then at 40, you're like, what do I do with the rest of my life?
You're right there. I mean, you said it perfectly, because it's so true. It's, I think you could probably have the same conversation with somebody that's in the NBA, or somebody that's NFL is a little tougher because your career is typically not long, but somebody that plays Major League Baseball, they're probably going to be in their prime right around 29, 30 playing Major League Baseball. It's tough. You know what I mean? It's there aren't a lot of resources out there for athletes to figure out what they're going to do, because when you're 29 or 30, you're thinking you're at your peak. You're ready to go conquer the world. You're not thinking about what you want to do when you retire. You know what I mean? But then that time sneaks up on you pretty quick. And there is a time when you start going, you look in the mirror and you're like, oh shit, like I don't know what the next 10 years of my life looks like. By the way, I have no experience in anything except playing professional sports, which, I mean, how much experience is that going to give me in the real world?
Right. You're like, I don't know how to look at tax returns. I can't go be a loan
officer. I don't know how to manage a P&L list. You know what I mean? I don't know how to manage a team of engineers. You know what I mean? And I don't know how to be an accountant. But you know, I don't know. It was a tough transition. There was about a month there where I was in real limbo, and I was like, well, coaching is the logical choice. I'll do that because I got to do something, right? And you know, I think I was fortunate enough to kind of find this avenue, and actually be really good at it. Yeah, which I think a lot of what I learned in becoming an Olympic gold medalist helps you figure things out quick. You got to be a quick study. And in management consulting, you have to be really sharp, and you almost have to like convince people quickly that you are able to bring value to them, right? And initially it was really tough to do what I was doing because in the role that I was in, I had to be able to be a really good, incredible consultant. I had to be able to sell, because a large part of our ability to make money was selling deals and opportunities into these companies. I had to be a really good executive coach, which is another skill set that I had to do. And I had to be really credible and good in front of a room. So like when I was leading training, or I was leading development areas, or I was guiding senior teams through different processes, you had to be really credible in front of a group. And I'd never done any facilitation work in the past. I mean, I'd been in front of crowds and stuff, so I knew what it was like, but not delivering content or things like that. And so I had to figure things out fast. And I think a lot of the things that I learned, just trying to continue to grind and be the best at a sport, helped me figure this out too. And like I said, I mean, that was 8.5 years ago, so things have been going really well, except, you know, 2020 was devastating for everybody. And the service industry, like management consulting, was one of those industries that just got pummeled. Because you know, even without COVID, when a company has hard times, one of the first things they stop investing in is development.
Right. And which is funny, because that's probably when they need it the most.
It's when they need to lean in the most, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I've been talking to a lot of my coaching clients, and I was like, hey, we need to get you to the point where when your income drops by 50%, because it's going to happen. Like Amazon's going to figure out how to do mortgages, or rates are going to go to 6%, and half the people are going to fall out of our industry. And so I keep telling my coaching clients, like, the reason you guys want to follow through with this plan and keep filling your pipeline and building those relationships is because when revenue drops by 50%, that's when you need to be able to thrive and stick around in the industry and still invest in coaching and still invest in your marketing, because that's when everybody else is going to fall by the wayside. Right. And I don't know if they believe me. I hope they do. But, you know, selfishly, I also want them to have enough money to keep paying for coaching.
Right.
So